Hello and welcome back to the Panther Sports Zone. I'm Dorian Waller.
I'm Khalid Gray.
And a happy Valentine's Day from the entire Panther Sports Zone crew. Khalid, man, what are your plans for tomorrow?
My plans for tomorrow are to just hang with my girlfriend, spend some time with her. We haven't really, haven't had time to do that. But Valentine's Day is the time to kind of hang with your loved ones and all that. And I'm gonna make sure that I'm gonna call my mother, call my father, call my family, kind of wish them happy Valentine's too, some of my relatives. But most of my weekend's gonna be relaxing with my girlfriend, my significant other, and have a spa day, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
really cool.
Oh, you got a nice little plan
Just
going.
a little plan going.
Yeah. My plan is going to be kind of smaller. I'm just going to make sure I call my mom, call my dad, call the rest of my extended family, make sure they know they're appreciated on days like these, So I'm really looking forward to the day.
Of course.
But we have a lot in store for y'all today. We're going to be talking about men's and women's basketball, the golf teams, So we're just ready to get into it. And starting off today, we're going to go straight into our men's and women's basketball teams. The men and women's basketball teams were in action in Florida this past Saturday and Monday. The men's team split their two games during the Florida road trip, dropping the first matchup against Bethune-Cookman 84-78. The Panthers bounced back with a win versus FAMU, winning the game in a nail-biter 61-58. The Panthers were led by Javante Hopkins, who put up 18 points in the win. Brian Miles added another double-double to his resume, putting up 12 points and hauling down 18 rebounds. This win for the Panthers moves them into 5-6 in conference play, placing them in a three-way tie with UAPB and Alabama A&M for the 8th seed.
On the women's side, the Lady Panthers dropped both their games during the Florida road trip, losing to Bethune-Cookman and FAMU. The Lady Panthers, their Monday matchup versus FAMU, in a 71-63 ball game. FAMU guard Ariana Grizzle went to the line 24 times, knocking down 20 of her 24 free throw attempts en route to a 27-point performance. The Panthers were led in scoring by Ryan Payne, who had 17 points. The Lady Panthers committed 28 turnovers and 30 fouls, ultimately costing them the game in the long run. So what do you feel like from both teams do you see on a nightly basis? I know that the Panthers produce a lot, both offensively and defensively, but just starting off with the men's first, that was a nail-biter of a game.
Oh, yeah, man. That was a good win. And I feel like they really needed this win. I feel like ever since their 3 straight wins on the road earlier in the season, they haven't performed up to standard on the road. So this win hopefully will get them back on track. They're performing pretty well at the Baby Dome, in front of the home crowd. But this win on the road should propel them. They have a couple more games on the road. They're trying to vie for that 8th seed so they get a chance to participate in the tournament, which I ultimately think they will accomplish. For me, what I'm seeing on a night-to-night basis, I feel like the perimeter defense sometimes lacks, and which is crazy because honestly, if you watch our team and when they're completely locked in, they're one of the best perimeter defense teams in the SWAC. So on days where their perimeter defense lacks, for example, the Texas Southern game, I feel like that's when they are not at their best, So if the defense locks in completely, and that's definitely bound to happen under Coach Smith, that's when I think they'll be at their best.
And something that I saw, something we were seeing on the stat sheet, was that Brian Miles took down 18 rebounds on the game. And that's something that our bigs were able to do all season long. Were able to rebound. Even with the first exhibition game, they had a lot of rebounds against the team. So I think the effort is something that's shared amongst both teams, both the women's and the men's team as well. And I definitely feel like when we get to that point where we're able to play in that tournament, we will go very far, but just because of our effort. But talking about the women's very briefly, you saw that there was 28 turnovers, if I'm not mistaken, and over 30 fouls. What do you think is the not the consequence, but what do you think leads to that kind of not focused gameplay?
Man, blowouts. That game against UAPB, absolute blowout. I mean, they have to stop turning over the ball. I mean, they just have to. These teams are putting pressure on them, and they really need to adjust to that. They need to respond accordingly because that UAPB game, although it was a blowout, it was definitely winnable. And I say that because UAPB, me and you had to discuss it. UAPB had the same amount as turnovers as the Panthers. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they both had 28 turnovers each. And I mean, 28 turnovers is horrendous. Don't get me wrong, but UAPB also had 28 turnovers, and they just weren't capitalizing on that. And I feel like UAPB turnovers are more towards them just messing around because they already thought they had the game, locked up. But the Panthers turnovers came in the backcourt, turning the ball over, lazy passes, things like that. So I feel like for the Panthers, the defensive side of the ball, for the Lady Panthers, is not the issue right now. Their offense still needs a little bit of a pecking order. We're kind of seeing that with Amari Williams, Ryan Payne, Jada Robertson.
Yes.
But it still needs kind of a pecking order and more, more structure. And I say that because we have scorers like Jerlyn Smith, who is very good at scoring. Don't get me wrong. I've seen her take over games at times. Her mid-range jump shot from the elbow, I love it. That's a beautiful shot. And I see games where kind of she fades into the background. And I feel like that needs to change.
Of course. But moving forward, we're going to go into softball. Our number 1 ranked Lady Panthers softball team was finally back in action this past weekend. The Lady Panthers dropped all 5 of their matchups during the 2024 Incarnate Word Invitational. The Lady Panthers dropped 2 matchups each to both Buffalo and Lindenwood, also losing 1 singular game to Incarnate Word. The Lady Panthers will be back in action this weekend at the HBCU Classic in Covington, Georgia. The Lady Panthers will face Howard, NCAT, and South Carolina State next. Amongst other schools. So with that being said, though, we briefly spoke about it. Excuse us for the delay, but we spoke about this before the show went up, that the softball team, they've had starts like this before, but were able to bounce back and come back and win. Just recently, they were the champions. So do you feel like the 5 losses are a worry right now?
Not at all. And I say that because going back in the history of these previous championship seasons, I mean, for example, in the 2022 season, the Lady Panthers dropped, please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, they dropped their first 17 or 19 games in a row. I mean, that's absurd. That's just insane. But they were still able to bounce back and win the SWAC championship.
Yes.
So I always take some of these games, really it's across all sports, I always take some of these first games with a grain of salt because, we are HBCU, underfunded. These other schools have the funding, the training, all that, which is, of course, unfair, but that's a conversation for a whole nother day. So they have all these means to be better, yada, yada, the programs. They're playing these big programs like Buffalo, like Lindenwood. They've dropped games to them. They drop games to Incarnate Word, another PWI like that. So I always take those games with a grain of salt because when we get back on even playing fields, like, for example, the HBCU Classic that's coming up against Howard, against South Carolina State, that's when we really show our mustard. We are the number 1 SWAC team for a reason. Like, that just doesn't come out of nowhere. So they've always started off their seasons with these kind of losing streaks. I believe last year was 0-9, 0-10 when they first started. And I remember I even came up here last year, I believe, and I was like, oh man, I'm kind of worried. But then they completely shut me up and proved me wrong. So this year I'm going to come and say I'm not completely worried at all.
Of course. And when we come back, we will be discussing the Panther men's and women's golf teams who were in action versus Texas Southern today. Also, get excited, Panther fans, as the SWAC Track and Field Indoor Championship is this weekend. Stay tuned for more Panther Sports Zone.
Welcome back to Panther Sports Zone. Continuing today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about our men's and women's golf teams. The men's and women's golf teams were in action against Texas Southern today. This matchup marked the first match of the semester for both the men's and women's teams. This matchup prepares the Panthers for the upcoming tournaments, the Gulf Coast Collegiate Tournament and the Trojan Invitational at USC. The Panthers will be participating in 2 more tournaments after the Trojan Invitational before entering the 2024 SWAC Championship April 16th through the 18th.
The SWAC Track and Field Indoor Championship. The SWAC is preparing for the upcoming Indoor Championship this weekend. The championship is scheduled to begin Saturday, February 17th and run through Sunday, the 18th. The Panthers are looking to take away the championship from Alabama State, who took the crown from Prairie View in 2023. The event will be live streamed starting Sunday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. For more information, please visit theswac.org. Panthers Athletics are looking for volunteers at the upcoming PV Relays from March 22nd to March 23rd. For more information, please contact Alicia Pete at alpete@pvamu.edu. We're going to take one more short break. However, when we come back, we will be talking more about our basketball teams and what they need to do to finish the season strong, as we are now at the midway point. Stay tuned after this break.
And before we come back for more PSZ, we want to give a special shout out to Charles Lane Jr., who was selected as SWAC Player of the Week this past week for averaging 20 points per game during Prairie View's Florida road trip. This is the second week in a row a Prairie View Panther has been selected as Player of the Week. Congratulations, Charles. We'll be back with more right after the break.
And we're back from the commercial break. My name is Khalid Gray.
And I'm Dorian Waller.
And we're going to get into what we feel is if our teams, both women's and men's basketball teams, should focus on having it be the midway point in the season. Mm-hmm. And just to start off the conversation, I would like to highlight something that the Panthers have done exceptionally well, and it's been giving their effort on defense each and every night. Even though we've had some games where there's been 30-point losses, we've still seen the stat totals equate in terms of, speaking of, like, for example, the UAPB game, with the Lady Panthers playing UAPB, even they both had the same amount of turnovers. Now, granted, we could have the conversation later about whether they took advantage of those turnovers, but it's the fact that they were still able to cause that many turnovers and still were able to battle offensively for offensive rebounds and defensive rebounds, rack up blocks and steals to also hinder that UAPB team. So I think, and you can interject at any time, I think that the defense needs to be the main focus for each team going further into the season and to tournament play.
Agreed. And, you saying that, I'm about to say something a little bit cliche, but, defense wins championships.
Of course.
And honestly, that is 100% true. the Panthers need to rely on their defense, both the men's and women's. I'm going to start specifically with the Lady Panthers. I said, of course, the offense does need a pecking order, but at the end of the day, if they can get their defense correct, they can win. They have a very excruciatingly tough Jackson State team coming up in the schedule, and a couple years ago, they actually had the chance to beat them, Jackson State, in their SWAC winning streak. So I feel like they have a chance to do that again, but they have to be completely locked in on both sides of the ball. We got to shut down them in the paint. They're very towering, probably the tallest team in the SWAC. So we just got to respond correctly. And that starts with the defensive end, and I'm really glad the Panthers got the new freshman Amari Williams to kind of match up with Jackson State's size. So I feel like that will be a very big key in this upcoming game, and just moving backwards a little bit, because I am a little bit ahead of schedule, this game against Southern this weekend, very important game. They need these wins. Like we mentioned, we're at the midway mark, they need these wins.
Yes.
Like, this is what they have to capitalize on right now. This has to be the turning point, if I could say so. And, that starts with the defense side of the ball, because honestly, like I mentioned earlier, the pecking order, all that'll come in the future. Ryan Payne, excellent scorer. Gerald Smith, excellent scorer. Desiree Lewis, elite paint presence. Amari Williams, only a freshman. I mean, I've seen her take over games, which is just crazy. So I feel like the scoring will come. And as long as they currently rely on defense and the scoring catches up by the tournament, I feel like they'll surprise people.
Yeah. And going into the men's defensively, I mean, when we see their games as well, just recently against FAMU, Brian Miles had 18 rebounds. That's
Incredible.
Something that we've seen our bigs do night in and night out. And something I also want to mention is people around the campus, around people that watch HBCU basketball, is the scoring ability from each team is something that is highly talked about. So what do you feel as if the men need to do moving forward past this midway point offensively going into these next few games?
So, we kind of talked about it, specifically you at the start of the season, the 3-point shooting.
Yes.
I feel like it's very streaky. Charles Smith IV, a very good shooter. Charles Lane Jr., a very good shooter. And I feel like more specifically for Lane, he can be streaky at times. And I feel like he's also turning the corner right now. I mean, this road trip, while we did lose the Bethune game, he played very, very well at FAMU. I mean, I believe it was 14 points off the bench. Correct me if I'm wrong. He just played great. So I feel like the shooting will come around, because if you kind of paid attention at the UAPB game, they were kind of, daring us to shoot. They were daring Javante to shoot. Brian even took a three, I believe. They definitely backed off on him. And I feel like it's kind of disrespectful, because I know our guys and I know all of them shoot. I mean, I've seen each and every one of them shoot. I mean, they're backing off Brian all the way when he's in the mid-range spot. And I know Brian has a very good mid-range jumper. So when those get consistent again on the offensive end, the ball movement is very good. Coach Smith's offensive set will always be nice. He has that one horns play that he really likes to run. So I feel like they just need to keep moving the ball. The shots will eventually fall, but at the same time, if they're not dropping, don't force it. You know what I'm saying?
Of course.
Do not force it.
Of course. So something else that I would like to highlight is playmaking. Now we say a lot of like Ryan. Ryan is a very good passer. Ryan's a very good passer. There's a lot of facilitators on each team as well. Javante Hopkins and Orlando, they're guards that can move the ball. Do you think facilitating the offense through our guards going forward, or should we go deeper into back to the basket? How do you think our offense should be played from both teams?
That's a very good question. I think it's a game by game thing. For example, we were just talking about Jackson State and their towering size. It may be better to lean on Ryan Payne and the rest of our guards, like Jada Roberson, for games like that. Now, for other teams like Southern, I don't believe they're too incredibly tall, both on the men's and women's sides. That might be the game where you lean more on Brian and Amari Williams, So it's just, I would say, take it by game thing.
That's a really good way to put that. I think one of my last questions is on the fly coaching. I think something that I've seen coaches on both teams is make on the fly adjustments. How important are those adjustments going to be going further into the season and tournament play?
They're very important, and I'm really glad you brought that up. One of my most admirable things about both of our coaches has always been their quick subs. back in high school, we seen a lot of coaches who only play 6 guys, 7 guys, and that easily burns out your guys. But if you make a mistake, or even if Coach Smith sees something, or even Coach Pugh, Coach Smith and Coach Pugh, they see something that they want to change at that very moment, I mean, they're making that substitution. Like, you could have somebody at the end of the bench that hasn't played until the third quarter or late in the second half, and they'll sub them in, and they'll know, like, they're going to make an impact. So on-the-fly coaching is very good. I really like that. That's one of the most admirable things about our coaches. And I kind of wanted to ask you this while we continue on the coaching side of things. I wanted to know, and this is kind of my own personal thing that I noticed on the offensive end, the Panthers this year, both the men's and women's teams, they have a set playbook, right?
Yes.
And I feel like in some ways they have moved away from it. Like, for example, I haven't really seen Coach Smith run his horn set as much as he used to in the past. Coach Pugh also has a horn set that she used to really run. Back when Kennedy Paul was here for the Lady Panthers, there was a play that got her on the elbow. Jerlyn Smith has kind of taken that role, and she's kind of moved away from that. Do you think that's messing up the offensive flow?
Well, I wouldn't say it's necessarily messing up offensive flow. However, I think it allows for more creativity on the offensive end. I think something I've noticed watching the game over the years has been when you lose a lot of structure, it kind of tenses up your offense. And I've seen both Ryan and Javonte and Orlando, sometimes even Brian Miles would take a wing and take his man down to the elbow. That creates more fluidity within your offense and allows for more weapons to be utilized. Specifically, when they played UAPB, you saw Charles Smith get a lot of 3-pointers off, and that really helped a lot of other players make such a huge impact. When Ryan scores her 25-point games, that allows for other people to get their touches as well. And I think another cliche thing that we like to say, your offense can be your defense sometimes. And I feel like moving away from the playbook is a good thing, but like you were mentioning, I feel like it's a game by game thing that they should do.
Well, I'm really excited to see our Panthers continue the season. I mean, I'm really I cannot really, put my excitement to work because, we're both basketball heads. So at the end of the day, I love watching the basketball games. I love watching our Lady Panthers and our men's Panthers get the win. So they will be back in action at 3 o'clock and 5:30 respectively on Saturday, February 18th. Just looking forward to the season continuing.
Me too. And this has been Panther Sports Zone with Khalid Gray and
Dorian Waller.
And it was a pleasure having you guys here talking sports with us every single night and every single evening. We will see you guys in the next one.